I'm filming this video now on a bright sunny day in the mountains of central Taiwan. If you look around behind me, this is a country with basically zero poverty. Zero, really. You can look up the statistics. It's remarkable how successful Taiwan is as an industrial country. It's remarkable how successful it is economically, educationally, in terms of government services, healthcare, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? On this street in particular, there's a whole lot of rusting corrugated iron that would make you think you were living in a third world country. And it's in this sense not out of the usual white Western fixation with political correctness. I wanted to make a quick video saying, hey, can we just stop? Can we stop using the terms third world and developing country, developing nations, developing economies, all that stuff? Could we just drop it? Could we just let that meme die? Here are people drying their laundry on rusting, rusting cyclone fences. That's what we call that in English. A cyclone fence. Real third world in its aesthetics. This particular alley. Of the two terms, developing country and third world, the more offensive really is developing nation, developing economy, developing country. What do you think's behind this rusting corrugated iron, huh? What do you think? People attempting to grow vegetables. I can't even say in their front yard, in front of this garage, abandoned garage. All right, I say again, Taiwan, it's not that Taiwan is the wealthiest country in the world. Taiwan has remarkably close to zero poverty. There is less poverty in Taiwan than there is in Japan. Less poverty in Taiwan than almost any country in Europe that I've done a comparative analysis with. Well, okay, not if you get into some of the freakishly wealthy countries in Europe like Luxembourg. But really, I've looked at the statistics. The achievement of Taiwan economically is remarkable. But nevertheless, a lot of people misunderstand the origin and meaning of third world as a concept. It does not refer to the contrast between the Soviet Union and the United States. It does not refer to the contrast between communism and capitalism. The origin of the term third world relates to the idea that Europe was the first world, and then the settlement of North America and South America, that was the second world. So that the first world was what people used to call the old world, and then the second world was what formerly was known as the New World in colonial terms. The settlement of the New World, the colonization of the New World, this is now out of fashion. And then the idea was that the third world was the whole remainder of planet Earth, where the same technologies, the same mode of production, much taken for granted in Europe, the United States, and Canada, that would now meaning after World War II basically, that would now spread increasingly throughout the so-called third world. So, where does Saudi Arabia fit into that concept? Saudi Arabia is not the only example, but I mean, obviously this is applied in a certain way, in a certain sense, to a kind of stereotypical poverty-stricken Africa. A continent of Africa imagined to be passively waiting for, salvation to arrive in the form of European and American development assistance, charity of one kind or another. It's another plot of vegetables being grown here behind me. You heard I was just next to a busy street with some industry on it. Those palm trees there, those are not decorative. Those also produce a cash crop of sorts. This actually looks a bit abandoned, this vegetable plot. Maybe somebody was farming this for vegetables a few years ago, and then at some point they lost interest or gave up the effort. But those palm trees above actually produce a legal addictive drug, not illegal but legal, that's sold here. And those are banana trees, those palms down there. Now I've lived in Cambodia, I've lived in Laos, I have lived in so-called third world, developing, poverty-stricken countries. They look a lot like this. They look a lot like where I'm standing right now in every way. The palm trees, the banana trees, the small plot gardening, the rust. But here we are amidst the wealth and splendor of a very affluent city in Taiwan. This city, I believe there is one homeless person here, and with no offense to him, I think he chooses to be homeless. I think it's a lifestyle choice. I don't think it's that he has no better alternatives. Haven't talked to the guy in depth, but that's the impression I get. But yeah, I think we have exactly one homeless person in this city. And again, almost zero measurable poverty. The problem with the concept of developing country, the reason why it's even worse than this notion of first world, second world, third world, is precisely that it presumes, it imagines, it argues that there is one destination that the rest of the world is tending towards, that there is one end point or goal, that there is one purpose economic development, democracy, cultural development, etc. exists for. And nothing could be further from the truth. This presumption also feeds into a very strange way of looking at, of understanding what's happening here and now in poverty-stricken countries. Places like Laos, Cambodia. You know, there are neighborhoods in Laos where, I'm sorry, I forget this, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, many years ago when I was living there in Laos, people just presumed, oh, all this will be bulldozed in no time. Like, we're building this part of the city now, but in just a few years there's going to be development. There's going to be, you know, this is a so-called developing country. There's going to be economic development that then brushes all this aside. All this is going to disappear. It's all going to be replaced by something better. And I think some of those people imagined that the future of the capital city of Laos would look like Hong Kong, and maybe some of them imagined that the future of Laos would look like Shanghai in China. And what none of them imagine is what they've got today, which is that after a very, very brief period of so-called development, the country stagnated. And you can look at Google Maps today, I can look at images on the internet today, and see that there's been absolutely no progress at all since I left the country in that way. That on the contrary, what you've had is regress. What you've got is a lot of rust, you know, that there was this sense that the future was bright, that anything was possible, that Laos was going to, quote unquote, catch up with developed countries. And that's built into this notion of a developing country, right? Like first world, second world, third world, as if there's some inevitable progress, like the falling of dominoes that leads from one to the next. And the truth is, the capital city of Laos is never going to resemble Hong Kong. It's never going to resemble Shanghai. It's never going to resemble New York or London or anything in Europe. And on the contrary, that country bankrupted itself, imitating a model of economic development that was never suited to it. So what would I propose if we were actually going to take this seriously, if we were going to stop speaking in terms of the third world, in terms of the developing world, if we were going to get rid of those terms, if we were going to start using, you know, language that doesn't have this built-in sense of teleology, this built-in sense of a foregone conclusion or destination that economic development of these countries is tending towards? My answer is we should use the words rich and poor. We should simply talk about poor countries, poverty-stricken countries, and we should talk about rich countries. The idea that development has a destination is a delusion. The idea that the first world and the second world represent an end point that the third world is progressing towards is propaganda that's not just to be discarded now. It's ceased to be coherent, it's ceased to be meaningful to any of the people it's been preached to.